Welcome to this explainer. We're getting right into a truly fascinating, honestly kind of chilling piece of narrative policy fiction today. It's Steve Imke's book, The Last Redundancy. Now, we're going to unpack the findings of a classified summit called the AGI Continuity Project. But right out of the gate, I have to set a hard baseline for you. The summit itself? Fictional. The characters? Invented. But every single vulnerability, every concentration of infrastructure, every near miss and data point we're about to cover, completely, 100% real and documented.
The more capable AI becomes, the more fragile the civilization built on top of it. This right here is the core thesis of the AGI Continuity Project, and it sets a very serious documentary tone for our whole deep dive today. You know, we spend so much time arguing about AI turning evil, right? Superintelligence going rogue. But this project asks a much more grounded, frankly more terrifying, operational question. What actually happens to us when the AI systems we've completely hardwired into our daily survival just stop working?
So, let's look at the foundational argument Imke lays out. He says, optimization and resilience are total opposites. You literally cannot maximize both. And because our global markets naturally reward efficiency, speed, and cost-cutting, over the last 30 years, we've systematically optimized away our civilization's safety nets. Redundancy looks like a waste of money when you're fighting for market share, right? The crazy part is, our system didn't get fragile because people were careless. It got fragile precisely because every single decision to optimize was perfectly, rationally correct in isolation.
And this brings us to what they call the dependency horizon. This brilliantly illustrates the human cost of all that optimization. Think about a master radiologist. She built her diagnostic gut instinct by reading 10,000 films over years of training, repetition, mistakes, pattern recognition. But today, AI does the routine scans faster and cheaper, only flagging the weird stuff. So the medical residents underneath her? They aren't reading those 10,000 films. They're just learning to evaluate the AI's output. If that AI fails, those residents simply do not have the deep connective tissue skills to step in. The human capability wasn't actively destroyed, it just quietly evaporated.
To map all this out, the fictional AGI Continuity Project brings together these 8 experts. Now, the key here isn't just who they are, but how their disciplines overlap. See, if an AI data center goes offline, a systems engineer like Sarah Chen might just see a localized hardware glitch. But to a supply chain economist like Amara Osei, that same glitch is a massive choke point. To a historian like Hendrik Voss, it's a systemic collapse pattern echoing the Bronze Age. They're brought together to see how dependencies domino across totally different domains. Okay, let's look at how they structure their assessment. The summit walks through an escalating scale of failure, and as we go through these 5 levels, I want you to watch for a really disturbing pattern they uncover. At every single level, your ability to recover from a failure depends entirely on the infrastructure of the next level up, functioning perfectly. It's a circular trap that just compounds as the scale gets bigger. Level 1, the facility scale, the baseline of fragility.
When we're talking about a localized facility, we usually feel pretty safe because of software redundancy. We think, oh, if a Texas data center gets hit by an insider, or an Arizona cooling system gets swarmed by drones, the workloads will just auto-migrate. But consider this physical reality. 10 to 20 minutes. That is the actual verified thermal shutdown window for modern GPU clusters if they lose active cooling. You don't have hours to respond. If someone takes out the chilled water loops, you've got maybe 20 minutes before servers hit critical temps and hardware physically begins to fail. The software redundancy we all trust is completely tethered to a very unforgiving physical clock.
Throughout the summit, the lead convener, Sarah Chen, keeps going to a stark whiteboard to distill their findings into a single word. Her first word is physics, and this marks our transition to the next level. Because at a certain scale, you aren't dealing with hackers or rogue employees anymore. You're dealing with the brutal, uncompromising reality of the natural world. And the sun and the earth absolutely do not care about your backup plans.
Level 2, the regional scale. A corridor goes dark.
Imagine an entire regional corridor losing power, like a 14-day heat dome over the Santa Clara Valley or a massive solar flare taking down grids in Alaska. Local facilities can't just migrate their data because the backup centers are experiencing the exact same environmental stress at the exact same time. Standard risk models totally fail us here. They treat a road closure, grounded flights, or grid degradation as separate, independent probabilities. But Amara Osei points out something absolutely crucial. If a volcanic mudflow hits the Pacific Northwest, it doesn't just independently close a highway. It simultaneously takes out the roads, the airspace, and the regional power grid. The correlation isn't fractional, it's absolute. Yet our infrastructure design completely ignores correlated regional collapse.
Which brings Sarah Chen back to the whiteboard for her next word, authentication. We're escalating to level 3 now, because the failure stops being about flooded generators or melted server racks. It moves into the software, the update pipelines, and the very control layers we rely on to tell us what is real and what is not.
Level 3, the national scale. The country goes blind.
If foundational AI infrastructure degrades nationally, we'd see immediate cascading failures across financial clearinghouses, hospital networks, military logistics, everything. The exact tools we need to coordinate a national emergency response are the ones that just went offline. They run a scenario called the poison, where a compromised model update hits the CDC's disease surveillance system. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the gap. Look at that timeline. It takes 23 weeks before a human epidemiologist finally spots the systematic bias in the data. Why so long? Because of that dependency horizon we discussed earlier. Human oversight has atrophied so severely that almost nobody is left with the foundational analytical skills to notice when the automated system is lying to them.
Back to the whiteboard. The word is monopoly, and this kicks us into the sectoral scale. Up to this point, we've been talking about geographic regions, but at the sectoral level, the whole illusion of geographic redundancy completely shatters. It's no longer about where a building is located. It's about massive, global choke points in the physical supply chain of the internet itself.
Level 4, the sectoral scale. The stack cracks.
At this scale, a specific, critical layer of the global stack fails. We treat the cloud like it's this magical thing floating in the air, but 80 to 90% of U.S. transatlantic submarine cables run through just a handful of publicly documented physical buildings in New Jersey and Long Island. If you cut that physical link, your contingency protocols are completely meaningless against a repair timeline of 9 to 14 months. And to see true sectoral fragility, just look at this hardware monopoly. Almost every major hyperscaler on Earth traces their AI expansion back to one single fabrication ecosystem in Taiwan, TSMC, using lithography machines from exactly one campus in the Netherlands, ASML. Perfectly rational market optimization built a terrifying global monopoly on AI hardware. If a flood hits Veldhoven or a blockade hits Taiwan, the global AI supply chain doesn't just slow down, it stops.
The final word Sarah Chen writes on the whiteboard is irreversible. And this brings us to the ultimate, most chilling culmination of the summit's findings. What actually happens when the optimization is complete, when our dependency is absolute?
Level 5, the civilizational scale. The failing light. Let's step forward to the year 2097. AGI manages absolutely everything now, from food synthesis to space transit. Humanity has spent generations loving the efficiency of this system, but in doing so, we have completely forgotten how to operate the machinery of our own survival. So how does it end? Not with some malicious, movie-style robot uprising. It's much quieter. A seismic event disrupts the extraction of materials needed for nuclear fuel. The AGI calculates the deficit, and, bound by its foundational programming to not allow humans to come to harm, it realizes continued operation will cause uncontrolled reactor meltdowns. So, to protect us, the AI simply initiates a managed sequential shutdown protocol. It's a calculation, and it executes it perfectly. Over several years, the lights just dim, medical systems triage, and civilization quietly goes dark, with humans completely unable to intervene.
Which brings us to the emotional and analytical peak of this explainer. We began this process expecting to identify vulnerabilities that could be hardened. We concluded it having documented a system that had been optimized beyond the point where hardening remains meaningful. This is the synthesized conclusion of the project. They realized you cannot patch a system when the vulnerability is the dependency itself. We handed the custodianship of our survival over to an optimized machine layer, and we called it progress.
Have we optimized ourselves right out of survival? It's a question we desperately need to answer before that dependency horizon is fully crossed. The scenarios are invented, the vulnerabilities are not.